driving 15 hours straight, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the burning desire to be there for your son. To witness a milestone. To be a part of his happiness. That's what I did. 15 hours. Just to be there for Leo's engagement dinner. And what happened when I arrived? Well, let's just say it wasn't quite the hallmark moment I'd envisioned. This isn't just a story about a missed party. It's about deception, hidden agendas, and the lengths a father will go to protect his son, even from himself. It's about questioning everything you think you know about the people closest to you. And it all started with a closed door. Have you ever felt that creeping sense of dread, the one that settles in your stomach and refuses to leave? That's what I felt as I stood on that doorstep, the silence hanging heavy in the air. The smell of pot roast wafted out, a cruel reminder of the celebration I was missing. Or, more accurately, had already missed. The door creaked open, and there he was. Leo. My son. His face, a mask of awkwardness. Behind him stood Isabel, his fiancée. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Dad? Leo stammered, "What are you doing here?" That's when she said it. Isabel. Her voice was cold, almost clinical. Oh, the engagement dinner? That was yesterday. Yesterday. 15 hours, reduced to a single, dismissive word. The blood drained from my face. I could feel the anger rising, a slow burn that threatened to consume me. But more than anger, there was confusion. How could they not have told me? How could they have forgotten? Leo mumbled something about a miscommunication, a calendar error. But I saw the look on his face. He wasn't just embarrassed, he was afraid. Afraid of Isabel. Afraid of something else entirely. The door closed. Just like that. No invitation to come in, no offer of a late-night snack, nothing. Just the click of the lock, sealing me out. That's when I knew something was wrong. Terribly, irrevocably wrong. This wasn't just about a missed party. This was about something much deeper, something darker. I drove to the nearest motel, a depressing little place with stained carpets and a flickering neon sign. I couldn't sleep. The image of that closed door kept flashing in my mind. And Isabel's face. That cold, calculating look. I started to think about Isabel's family. They seemed too perfect. Wealthy, influential, impeccably mannered. But something about them felt off. Like a meticulously crafted facade. I remembered seeing a photo of Isabel's family in their living room, a photo showcasing what they claimed was a collection of presidential correspondence. Rare letters, supposedly written by founding fathers. Priceless artifacts of American history. That's where I started. With that photo. I pulled it up on my phone, zooming in on the details. The paper, the handwriting, the signatures. Something didn't add up. I spent hours researching, scouring historical archives, comparing the letters to known examples. And then it hit me. The paper was the wrong type. The handwriting was inconsistent. The signatures were forged. They were fakes. All of them. But why? Why would a family like that need to fake historical documents? What were they hiding? I dug deeper, tracing their business dealings, their investments, their connections. And I discovered a web of lies, a network of deceit that stretched back decades. It turned out that the fake collection was about to be used as collateral for a massive business deal, a deal that would make Isabel's family even richer and more powerful. I found evidence that Isabel's grandfather had ordered the fakes decades ago, creating a false history, a fabricated legacy. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let them get away with it. I couldn't let Leo be caught in their web of lies. I called Leo, careful not to reveal what I knew. I started asking him questions about the letters, about Isabel's family, about their history. He stumbled, he hesitated, he clearly didn't know the answers. He was completely blind. Superficial. He was in love with the image, the facade, not the reality. That's when I knew what I had to do. I had to expose them. I had to reveal the truth, no matter the consequences. I concocted a plan. A risky plan, but the only one I could think of. I invited a journalist, someone I trusted, someone who wouldn't be afraid to ask the tough questions. I also invited the director of the National Archives, an expert in historical documents. I knew this could blow up in my face. I knew it could ruin everything. But I couldn't stand by and watch my son be manipulated, used as a pawn in their game. The day of the party arrived. The party announcing the deal, the party showcasing the fake collection. I stood in the corner, watching, waiting. The director of the National Archives was introduced. He approached the precious letter, examined it carefully, and then, with a polite smile, he exposed it. A masterful copy, he said. A clever forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. The room went silent. The deal collapsed on the spot. Isabel's family reputation was ruined. The aftermath was chaotic. Lawsuits, investigations, bankruptcies. Isabel's family lost everything. Leo came to me, broken and remorseful. He begged for forgiveness. He finally saw the truth. I didn't forgive him immediately. But I knew he was my son. And I knew he had been manipulated. In the end, I donated the family heirloom Bible to a university, establishing an archive. A place where the truth could be preserved, where authentic history could be studied. The final scene. It's me, passing on knowledge, sharing my experiences, affirming the value of truth and authentic heritage. Because in the end, that's all that really matters. Knowing who you are, where you come from, and what you stand for. Don't let anyone else define your history. Don't let anyone else write your story. Find the truth, and hold on to it. Your legacy depends on it. So, what about you? Have you ever had a moment where you questioned everything? Share your stories in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of deception, family, and the pursuit of truth. Because sometimes, the greatest discoveries are found behind closed doors. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of deception, family, and the pursuit of truth. Because sometimes, the greatest discoveries are found behind closed doors. So, where was I? Oh yes, standing on that porch, the sting of Leo's awkward apology still echoing in my ears. 15 hours. 15 hours I'd driven, fueled by stale coffee and the burning anticipation of celebrating my son's happiness. And for what? To be told, essentially, that I was a day late and $1 short. The door clicked shut. I stood there, a silhouette against the harsh porch light, feeling the weight of those miles settling in my bones. It wasn't just the wasted trip, it was the casual dismissal, the feeling that my presence, my effort, meant so little. I could have turned around, driven straight back, swallowed my pride and pretended it didn't matter. But something gnawed at me, a disquiet that went beyond simple disappointment. It was the way Isabel had said it, that chillingly polite pronouncement that the engagement dinner was yesterday. There was a coldness in her eyes, a calculated indifference that set off alarm bells I hadn't even known I possessed. I didn't go back. I found a motel, a cheap place on the outskirts of town with questionable stains on the carpet and a faint smell of stale cigarettes. It was perfect. It was a place to think, to dissect, to understand what had just happened. Sleep was out of the question. My mind was racing, replaying the scene, searching for clues, for anything that could explain the unsettling feeling that had taken root in my gut. I pulled out my laptop, the same one I used for my research, for unraveling historical puzzles. Tonight, the puzzle was my son's future. I started with Isabel's family. A quick online search revealed a picture-perfect facade, wealth, philanthropy, social standing. The kind of family that seemed to have it all. But something felt manufactured. Too perfect. Like a carefully constructed stage set. I dug deeper, scouring news articles, social media posts, anything that could offer a glimpse behind the curtain. And then I found it. A photo, buried in the archives of a local newspaper, of Isabel's grandfather receiving an award for his extensive collection of presidential correspondence. The caption boasted about the historical significance of these letters, supposedly penned by some of the most influential figures in American history. That's when the game changed. My area of expertise isn't just history, it's historical authenticity. I can spot a forgery from a mile away. And something about that photo, about the way those letters were displayed, screamed fake. The paper, the ink, the handwriting, it all felt wrong. I zoomed in, pixel by pixel, my heart pounding in my chest. The signature, on one of the letters, supposedly from Thomas Jefferson, was an obvious imitation. The paper looked too new, too pristine. It was a sloppy attempt, really, but most people wouldn't know the difference. Most people wouldn't care. But I cared. I cared because my son was about to marry into this family, a family built on what appeared to be a foundation of lies. And I couldn't let him walk blindly into that trap. This wasn't just about a missed engagement dinner anymore. This was about protecting my son, about exposing the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The motel room suddenly felt less bleak, less like a prison. It was a command center, a staging ground for the battle that was about to begin. I had a long night ahead of me. The truth, as always, was buried deep, and I was ready to dig. My son deserved nothing less. This wasn't just about him, it was about integrity, about the value of authentic history, and about the lengths a father will go to protect his child, even from themselves. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, I wouldn't let them get away with it. This wasn't just about him, it was about integrity, about the value of authentic history, and about the lengths a father will go to protect his child, even from themselves. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, I wouldn't let them get away with it. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. The hum of the motel air conditioner was a constant, droning reminder that I was alone, miles from home, and embroiled in something far more complicated than a simple misunderstanding. I stared at the ceiling, the patterns of the popcorn texture morphing into distorted faces, each one whispering doubts and anxieties. Was I doing the right thing? Was I meddling where I didn't belong? Was I about to destroy my son's happiness based on a hunch and a few inconsistencies in a photograph? The questions swirled, but the image of Leo's vacant expression as he stammered an apology haunted me. He seemed so lost. So unlike the bright, inquisitive boy I had raised. Isabel, on the other hand, was a study in cold calculation. Her eyes, when she delivered the news about the engagement dinner, held no warmth, no regret, only a dismissive indifference that chilled me to the bone. I pulled myself out of bed, the cheap motel blanket sliding to the floor. Time to get to work. I needed to know more about the Van der Linde family, Isabel's family. What were they hiding? What was their game? And most importantly, how deeply was Leo involved? I started with the photograph, the one that had first raised my suspicions. The so-called presidential correspondence was prominently displayed in their living room, a collection of framed letters purportedly written by various American presidents. It was a bold statement, a clear attempt to project an image of historical significance and refined taste. But the closer I looked, the more flaws I found. The paper stock was wrong for the era, the signatures looked too perfect, almost as if they had been traced. And then there was the language. The tone and phrasing felt off. Like someone trying too hard to sound presidential. I spent hours online, cross-referencing historical documents, comparing signatures, and researching the Van der Linde family history. The deeper I dug, the more inconsistencies I uncovered. Their claims of old money and aristocratic lineage seemed dubious at best. There were gaps in their family tree, unexplained periods of wealth and poverty, and a disturbing pattern of lawsuits and shady business dealings. It became clear that the Van Derlens were not who they claimed to be. They were imposters, living a carefully constructed lie built on a foundation of deception. And they were about to use that lie to leverage a massive business deal, using the fake historical documents as collateral to secure a loan that would solidify their position in society. The thought sickened me. They were not only deceiving my son, but they were also defrauding investors and desecrating the memory of historical figures. I had to stop them. But how? I was just one man, armed with nothing but a hunch and a growing pile of circumstantial evidence. I knew I couldn't go to the authorities. They would laugh me out of the room. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence that would expose the Van Derlens for who they really were. And I needed to find it fast. That's when I remembered the family Bible. Leo's grandfather, my father, had passed it down to me. It was more than just a religious text, it was a record of our family history, filled with handwritten notes, birth certificates, and old photographs. It was a tangible link to our past, a testament to our struggles and triumphs. And it was something that the Van Derlens would never understand. It was real. It was authentic. It was everything they were not. It was authentic. It was everything they were not. That old Bible, worn smooth by generations of honest hands, smelled of history, of sacrifice, of a life lived with integrity. It was a stark contrast to the meticulously crafted facade Isabel's family had erected. And as I sat there in that sterile motel room, the gears in my mind began to grind. The rejection at the door, Leo's vacant apology, Isabel's icy demeanor, it all fueled a fire within me. This wasn't just about a missed engagement dinner, it was about something far deeper, something fundamentally wrong. I needed to understand. I needed to know what kind of quicksand my son was wading into. So, I started with the picture. That photograph of the presidential correspondence that Isabel's family so proudly displayed. The one that screamed fake louder than a foghorn in a library. I pulled it up on my laptop, zooming in, pixel by pixel. The paper stock was wrong, the ink was too vibrant, the signature, oh, the signature. It was a clumsy forgery, a blatant insult to historical accuracy. But why? Why go to such lengths? What was the purpose of this elaborate charade? That's when the business deal came into focus. I remembered Leo mentioning something about a large investment, a partnership hinged on the families. Prestige. Prestige built on lies. The next few hours were a blur of online research, digging through archives, cross-referencing dates and documents. I felt like a detective in a dusty film noir, chasing shadows and whispers. And the more I dug, the more I uncovered. It wasn't just the letters. It was the awards, the accolades, the entire carefully constructed narrative of a family built on deception. I discovered that Isabel's grandfather, a man who had amassed a fortune through questionable means, had commissioned the forgeries decades ago. He saw them as a shortcut to respectability, a way to buy his way into a world that would otherwise have rejected him. And now, his granddaughter was using them to secure an even bigger fortune, perpetuating the cycle of deceit. My heart ached for Leo. He was so blinded by the glitz and glamour, so eager to please, that he couldn't see the rot beneath the surface. He was being used, manipulated, and he didn't even realize it. I had to do something. I couldn't stand by and watch him throw his life away on a lie. So I called him. I tried to be subtle, to gently nudge him towards the truth. I asked him about the letters, about the history, about the people who supposedly wrote them. He stumbled, he hesitated, he clearly knew nothing. He was reciting lines fed to him by Isabel, parroting a script he didn't understand. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, he was completely blind. Superficial. He cared more about the appearance of wealth and status than about genuine connection or integrity. That call confirmed what I already suspected, but it also hardened my resolve. I knew I couldn't just tell him the truth. He wouldn't believe me. He was too far gone, too invested in the fantasy. I needed to expose the lie publicly, to shatter the illusion in a way that he couldn't ignore. I needed to bring the truth to light, even if it meant causing pain and embarrassment. That's when the plan began to form, a risky, audacious plan that could potentially backfire spectacularly. But I was desperate. I had to try. My son's future was at stake. And so, I started making calls. I contacted a journalist I knew, a woman with a reputation for uncovering corruption. I also reached out to the director of the National Archives, a man who dedicated his life to preserving and protecting historical authenticity. I painted a picture of a potential fraud, a possible threat to national heritage. I baited the hook, and they both took it. I knew it was a gamble. But sometimes, you have to take risks to protect the people you love. Even if they don't realize they need protecting. Even if they resent you for it. The thought of Leo, trapped in a gilded cage of lies, fueled my determination. I was going to expose Isabel's family, and I was going to save my son, even if it was the last thing I did. The drive back to that town, to the scene of the engagement dinner, felt longer than the first. This time, though, I wasn't filled with anticipation. I was filled with a grim resolve, a sense of purpose that had been dormant for too long. It was time to fight for what was right, for what was real, for the future of my son. I was filled with a grim resolve, a sense of purpose that had been dormant for too long. It was time to fight for what was right, for what was real, for the future of my son. The sting of that slammed door, the dismissive tone of Isabel, the pathetic apology from Leo, it all fueled a fire within me. I wasn't going to let him marry into a family that reeked of deception. It wasn't about snobbery or some antiquated notion of social standing, it was about protecting my son from a life built on lies. He deserved better, and I was going to make sure he got it. The motel room was sterile, the air thick with the scent of cheap disinfectant. A far cry from the opulent surroundings I imagined Isabel's family was used to. But it was a base of operations, a place to strategize. I pulled out my laptop, the screen flickering to life in the dim light. My fingers danced across the keyboard, navigating the digital landscape with a practiced ease honed over years of research and analysis. Isabel's family was my target now, and I was going to dissect them, layer by layer, until I found the truth. Where to start? The engagement dinner, or rather, the lack thereof, had provided one crucial clue, a photograph displayed prominently on the mantelpiece. Isabel, her parents, and some older gentleman, presumably her grandfather, standing proudly next to what was described as presidential correspondence. A signed letter from, if I recalled correctly, John F. Kennedy. It was a bold claim, a centerpiece of their supposed legacy. And it reeked of fabrication. My gut told me it was a fake, and my gut, after all these years, was rarely wrong. I zoomed in on the image, pixel by pixel, scrutinizing the details. The paper stock, the ink, the signature itself, something was off. It didn't have the weight, the feel of authenticity. It felt manufactured. I cross-referenced the signature with known examples, comparing minute details, the subtle curves and flourishes that define a genuine signature. The discrepancies were glaring. The spacing was inconsistent, the pressure uneven. It was amateurish, really. But why? What was the purpose of this elaborate charade? Were they simply trying to impress potential suitors? Or was there something more sinister at play? The thought gnawed at me. This wasn't just about vanity, it felt like a deliberate attempt to construct a false narrative, to create an illusion of prestige and power. And if they were willing to fabricate something as significant as presidential correspondence, what else were they hiding? I delved deeper, scouring public records, newspaper archives, online databases. I wanted to know everything about the Beaumont family, their history, their finances, their connections. I pieced together fragments of information, slowly building a profile. They presented themselves as pillars of the community, philanthropists, art collectors. But the deeper I dug, the more cracks appeared in their carefully constructed facade. There were whispers of shady business deals, of questionable investments, of a family fortune built on something other than honest labor. The grandfather, Arthur Beaumont, emerged as the key figure. He was the patriarch, the architect of the family's supposed success. He was also, I suspected, the source of the deception. I found records of his involvement in several questionable ventures, businesses that had mysteriously collapsed, leaving a trail of broken promises and ruined lives. He was a man who wasn't afraid to bend the rules, to cut corners, to do whatever it took to get ahead. And it seemed he had passed that legacy down to his daughter, Isabel's mother, and now, potentially, to my son. The more I uncovered, the more determined I became. I had to expose them, to reveal the truth before Leo made the biggest mistake of his life. But how? Simply telling him wouldn't work. He was blinded by Isabel's charm, by the allure of her family's wealth and status. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence that would shatter his illusions. I needed to find the smoking gun, the definitive link between the Beaumont family and their fraudulent activities. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was getting closer. The truth was out there, hidden beneath layers of deceit, and I was going to find it, no matter the cost. The weight of my son's future, his happiness, rested squarely on my shoulders. And I wouldn't let him down. The weight of my son's future, his happiness, rested squarely on my shoulders. And I wouldn't let him down. Not this time. I'd already missed so much, the little league games, the school plays, the graduations, business trips, always business trips. Excuses. Empty excuses that echoed in the hollow spaces of my heart. This engagement dinner, this was my chance to finally be there, to show Leo the first cared, that he mattered. 15 hours. 15 hours I spent behind the wheel, the landscape blurring past in a hypnotic rush. Each mile devoured felt like a step closer to redemption, a chance to rewrite a lifetime of missed opportunities. The engine hummed a steady rhythm, a soundtrack to my growing anticipation. I rehearsed the things I would say, the congratulations, the fatherly advice, the simple, "I'm proud of you," that had been stuck in my throat for far too long. I pictured Leo's face, the surprise, maybe even a flicker of happiness in his eyes. That image fueled me, pushing me through the fatigue, the endless stretches of highway. Then came the door. The heavy oak door that slammed shut on my hopes, my carefully constructed image of a loving reunion. "Oh, we had it yesterday." Her voice, cold and clipped, cut through me like a shard of ice. Isabel. Leo's fiancée. Her eyes, devoid of warmth, lingered on me for a moment, assessing, dismissive. And Leo, standing behind her, awkward, apologetic, a ghost of the son I remembered. The door closed. The click echoed in the sudden silence, a final punctuation mark on my hopes. I stood there, the motel key clutched in my hand, the hum of the air conditioner a mocking counterpoint to the turmoil inside me. 15 hours. For what? To be dismissed, rejected, erased. The anger simmered, a slow burn beneath the surface. But anger alone wouldn't solve anything. I needed answers. I needed to understand. Why the secrecy? Why the coldness? Why did Leo seem so lost? Isabel's family. They were the key, I knew it. Something about them felt off. The way they carried themselves, the way they spoke, the subtle air of superiority. It reeked of artifice. I needed to know who they really were. And how they had managed to ensnare my son. The photograph. It was a seemingly innocuous snapshot, a family portrait displayed prominently in their living room. But something about it bothered me, a discordant note in the carefully orchestrated symphony of wealth and privilege. A presidential correspondence, displayed proudly on a nearby table. A collection of letters purportedly written by historical figures. A scholar I was, and my instincts screamed, fake. I started digging. Late into the night, fueled by cheap coffee and a growing sense of unease, I scoured the internet, searching for any information I could find on Isabel's family. Their history, their business dealings, their social connections. The deeper I delved, the more inconsistencies I uncovered. Discrepancies in their family tree, questionable investment practices, whispers of shady deals. Then I found it. An article detailing the acquisition of a significant collection of historical documents. The very same presidential correspondence I had seen in the photograph. The article mentioned a planned exhibition, a prestigious event that would solidify the family's reputation and open doors to even greater wealth and influence. But the article also contained a crucial detail: the documents were scheduled to be used as collateral for a massive business deal, a deal that could make Isabel's family incredibly rich. And Leo, caught in the middle, blinded by love, was about to become a pawn in their game. The anger flared again, hotter this time, fueled by protectiveness, by a desperate need to save my son from a fate he didn't deserve. I had to expose them. I had to reveal the truth before it was too late. But how? I was just one man, armed with nothing but a motel room, a laptop, and a burning desire to protect my son. I needed a plan. And I needed it fast. The clock was ticking. Leo's future, his happiness, depended on it. The clock was ticking. Leo's future, his happiness, depended on it. And after driving 15 hours, enduring a backache that felt like a rusted hinge, and fueled by lukewarm coffee and stale gas station sandwiches, that future felt precarious. Seeing that door close, the finality of that click, it wasn't just a rejection of me, it felt like a rejection of a lifetime of choices, of sacrifices made in the name of fatherhood. I needed to understand. What was so important, so urgent, that it couldn't wait 15 minutes? That motel room, with its generic art and musty smell, became my war room. I couldn't shake the image of Leo's awkward apology, the way his eyes darted around, avoiding mine. He wasn't just embarrassed, he was controlled. Controlled by Isabel, by her family, by something I couldn't quite put my finger on. My gut screamed that something was terribly wrong. The years I spent in academia, poring over texts, dissecting arguments, weren't just about dusty books and tenure. They honed my ability to see patterns, to detect inconsistencies, to sniff out a lie. So, I started with what I had, a photograph. A picture Isabel had posted online, a seemingly innocuous snapshot of her family's presidential correspondence. Supposedly, a collection of letters from various presidents to her esteemed grandfather. Any historian worth their salt would salivate at the prospect. But something felt off. The paper looked too clean, the ink too vibrant for documents that were supposedly decades old. I zoomed in, pixel by pixel, scrutinizing the watermarks, the signatures, the very texture of the paper. My heart pounded in my chest as I saw it, a slight inconsistency in the watermark, a barely perceptible shift in the font. These weren't genuine artifacts, they were forgeries. Masterful, yes, but forgeries nonetheless. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about a misplaced engagement dinner. This was about deception, about a carefully constructed facade. Isabel's family wasn't just wealthy, they were built on a foundation of lies. And my son, my naive, trusting son, was about to marry into it. But why? What was the purpose of this elaborate charade? What did they stand to gain? I needed to dig deeper. I scoured the internet, piecing together fragments of information like a detective solving a cold case. Public records, news articles, social media posts, each piece of the puzzle revealed a darker, more sinister picture. I discovered that Isabel's family was on the verge of a massive business deal. A deal that hinged on their reputation, on their perceived legacy of integrity and influence. And that fake collection? It was about to be used as collateral, a way to secure funding, to solidify their power. The pieces were falling into place, but the stakes were higher than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about protecting my son from a bad marriage, it was about exposing a web of deceit that could have far-reaching consequences. I had to act, and I had to act fast. I remembered a conversation I had with Leo a few months prior. He was so excited about Isabel, about her family's history, about the amazing collection of historical documents. He spoke with such blind adoration, such unquestioning faith. It was then I knew he was utterly, irrevocably smitten. He was seeing what he wanted to see, not the reality that was staring him in the face. I had to test him. I called him, feigning casual interest in the collection, asking him about specific letters, about the provenance of certain documents. His answers were vague, superficial, clearly parroting what he had been told. He didn't know anything about the history he was so eager to embrace. He was completely blind. That conversation solidified my resolve. I couldn't stand by and watch him be manipulated, used as a pawn in this elaborate game. I had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Isabel's family was powerful, influential, and they wouldn't hesitate to protect their secrets. But I had something they didn't, the truth. And I was willing to fight for it. The next morning, I put my plan into motion. It was risky, audacious, and potentially career-ending. But I had no choice. Leo's future, and perhaps the future of something much larger, depended on it. I contacted a journalist I knew, a seasoned reporter with a reputation for uncovering corruption. I also reached out to the director of the National Archives, a respected authority on historical documents. I invited them both to the party announcing the deal, the party where Isabel's family would unveil their precious collection to the world. I knew that once the truth was revealed, the whole house of cards would come crashing down. The suspense was almost unbearable. I knew that once the truth was revealed, the whole house of cards would come crashing down. The suspense was almost unbearable. I sat there in that cheap motel room, the buzzing of the fluorescent light above me a constant, irritating hum. It mirrored the buzzing in my own head, the frantic calculations, the what-ifs, the possibilities swirling around like a dust devil. 15 hours. 15 hours I'd driven, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the desperate hope of seeing my son happy, of sharing in this milestone moment in his life. And for what? To be turned away at the door, dismissed with a mumbled apology and a cold shoulder. But it wasn't just the rejection. It was the lie. The carefully constructed facade that Isabel and her family were presenting to the world. The fake presidential correspondence, the fabricated history, the blatant deception. It all reeked of desperation, of a desperate need to appear important, to wield influence they didn't actually possess. And Leo, my Leo, was being blinded by it all. He was so caught up in the glamour, the perceived prestige, that he couldn't see the rot festering beneath the surface. The photograph of the presidential correspondence mocked me from the grainy printout. The inconsistencies were glaring once you knew what to look for. The paper stock was wrong, the font was an anachronism, the signature a clumsy forgery. It was amateurish, really, but I suspected that most people wouldn't even think to question it. They would be too impressed by the aura of importance, too eager to believe the story being presented to them. My mind raced. What was the endgame here? What were Isabel's family trying to achieve? It didn't take long to uncover the truth. The fake collection was about to be used as collateral for a massive business deal, a deal that would solidify their position in the upper echelons of society, a deal that would make them untouchable. But it was all built on a foundation of lies, a house of cards waiting for the slightest breeze to topple it. I delved deeper, driven by a mixture of anger and a desperate need to protect my son. I spent hours poring over old documents, cross-referencing dates, and tracing the provenance of the fake artifacts. The rabbit hole got deeper and deeper, leading me to a shadowy figure from Isabel's grandfather's past, a man with a reputation for shady dealings and a penchant for forgery. He was the key, the architect of this elaborate deception. The more I learned, the more disgusted I became. This wasn't just about money or power. It was about manipulating history, about rewriting the narrative to suit their own selfish purposes. It was a betrayal of truth, a slap in the face to anyone who valued authenticity and integrity. And my son, my Leo, was about to become a pawn in their game. I had to stop them. But how? I couldn't just walk in and accuse them of fraud. They would deny it, dismiss me as a crazy old man, and Leo would believe them. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence that would expose their lies for everyone to see. And I needed a plan. A plan that would not only expose the fraud but also protect my son from the fallout. The answer came to me in the middle of the night, a flash of inspiration that cut through the fog of anxiety and despair. I would use their own ambition against them. I would invite a journalist, someone with a reputation for uncovering the truth, and the director of the National Archives, an expert in historical documents, to the party announcing the deal. Let them examine the precious letter, let them expose the forgery in front of everyone. It was a risky plan, but it was the only way. I knew that once the truth was out, there would be consequences. But I also knew that it was the right thing to do. My son deserved to know the truth, even if it hurt. And the world deserved to know that some things are more important than money, power, or social standing. The truth matters. Authenticity matters. And family, true family, stands by each other, even when it's difficult. Authenticity matters. And family, true family, stands by each other, even when it's difficult. That's what I always believed. That's what I tried to instill in Leo. But standing there, on that doorstep, the sting of rejection still fresh, I questioned everything. 15 hours. 15 hours I'd driven, fueled by excitement, by a father's desire to share in his son's joy. 15 hours, only to be met with a closed door and a hollow apology. "Oh, we had it yesterday." The words echoed in my mind, a cruel mockery of my good intentions. The motel room was bleak, the silence amplifying the turmoil within me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. It wasn't just the missed engagement dinner. It was Leo's awkwardness, Isabel's coldness, the entire situation felt staged. I needed answers. I needed to understand what had driven my son to this, to prioritize appearances over his own father. My mind, honed by years of meticulous research, began to dissect the little I knew about Isabel and her family. The presidential correspondence, the supposed family heirloom that Isabel's father flaunted. That's where I started. A photograph, a seemingly innocuous image of the letter, was all I needed. The internet is a powerful tool, a digital rabbit hole that can lead you to truths you never imagined. And I went down that rabbit hole. Hours blurred into a frenzy of online searches, cross-referencing historical documents, scrutinizing watermarks, analyzing paper types. The more I dug, the more inconsistencies I found. The paper was wrong for the period. The handwriting, while expertly done, lacked the subtle nuances of the historical figure it was supposed to emulate. And then, the smoking gun, a watermark that didn't exist until decades after the letter was allegedly written. It was a fake. A masterful one, perhaps, but a fake nonetheless. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about a misplaced family pride. This was about deception, about building a facade on a foundation of lies. What else were they hiding? What was Leo getting himself into? My paternal instincts kicked into overdrive. I had to protect him, even if he didn't realize he needed protecting. Sleep was impossible. My mind raced, connecting the dots, weaving a narrative of ambition and deceit. The fake correspondence, I surmised, was likely part of a larger scheme, a carefully constructed illusion designed to impress, to manipulate, to gain an advantage. But what advantage? What were they trying to achieve? I revisited every conversation I'd had with Leo over the past few months, searching for clues, for anything that might shed light on his motivations. He'd mentioned a business deal, a significant investment that would secure his future. Could the fake correspondence be used as collateral? It seemed far-fetched, but in the world of high finance, perception is often more valuable than reality. Driven by a growing sense of urgency, I delved deeper into Isabel's family history. Public records, newspaper archives, even social media posts, I devoured everything I could find. And that's when I uncovered the name, Silas Blackwood, Isabel's grandfather. A name whispered in hushed tones, a figure shrouded in controversy. He was a man known for his ruthlessness, his ambition, and his questionable ethics. A forgotten article from a small-town newspaper revealed a scandal from decades ago. A local historian had accused Silas Blackwood of commissioning forgeries of historical documents. The accusation was dismissed, the historian discredited, but the seed of doubt had been planted. And now, decades later, that seed was sprouting, blossoming into a horrifying truth. Silas Blackwood had ordered the fakes. And now, his granddaughter was using them to further her own ambitions. I picked up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to warn Leo. But how could I tell him without shattering his world, without destroying his faith in the woman he loved? I decided on a subtle approach, a test of his knowledge, a gentle nudge towards the truth. I asked him about the historical significance of the presidential correspondence, peppering my questions with specific details, probing for genuine understanding. His answers were vague, superficial, echoing the platitudes he'd likely heard from Isabel and her family. It was clear, he was completely blind. He had no idea about the truth, about the web of lies he was entangled in. He was being used, manipulated, and I couldn't stand by and watch it happen. I had to act. I had to expose the truth, not just for Leo's sake, but for the sake of authenticity, for the sake of preserving what is real and genuine in a world increasingly obsessed with appearances. The next step was risky, but I had a plan. I had to expose the truth, not just for Leo's sake, but for the sake of authenticity, for the sake of preserving what is real and genuine in a world increasingly obsessed with appearances. The next step was risky, but I had a plan. It was a gamble, a calculated one, but a gamble nonetheless. I knew Isabel's family, the Dubois, were hosting a lavish party to celebrate the business deal hinged on their priceless collection of historical documents. This party was my stage. My opportunity to unveil the charade. My mind raced, piecing together the final details. I needed irrefutable proof, an authority figure whose word would carry weight, someone who couldn't be easily dismissed as a disgruntled old man. The director of the National Archives was the obvious choice, but convincing him to attend, to potentially disrupt such a high-profile event, was a challenge. I had to present a compelling case, a reason beyond mere suspicion. I drafted a detailed email, outlining my findings, the inconsistencies in the documents, the blatant forgeries. I attached high-resolution scans of the presidential correspondence, highlighting the anachronisms, the telltale signs of modern paper and ink. Then came the journalist, a seasoned reporter known for her integrity and relentless pursuit of truth. She was skeptical at first, naturally, but the evidence I presented, the sheer audacity of the Dubois deception, piqued her interest. She agreed to investigate, to attend the party, and to be ready to publish the story if my suspicions proved correct. The day of the party arrived with a suffocating weight of anticipation. I felt a nervous energy coursing through me. This was it. Everything I had worked for, the long hours of research, the sleepless nights poring over documents, it all came down to this moment. I arrived early, subtly observing the room, the guests, the Dubois family, radiating an air of smug self-assurance. Leo was there too, beaming with pride, oblivious to the storm that was about to break. He rushed over to greet me, a flicker of unease in his eyes. I forced a smile, playing the part of the supportive father, the doting grandfather. The director of the National Archives arrived, looking slightly out of place amidst the opulent surroundings. I discreetly guided him to the display case where the priceless letter was showcased. He examined it closely, his face betraying nothing. The journalist was also present, discreetly taking notes, her eyes scanning the room, assessing the situation. The moment of truth arrived when Isabel's father, the patriarch of the Dubois family, took to the stage to announce the business deal and to extol the virtues of his family's historical legacy. He held up the letter, beaming with pride. That was my cue. I nodded subtly to the director. He stepped forward, his voice calm and authoritative, cutting through the self-congratulatory atmosphere. He politely requested to examine the letter more closely. He held it up to the light, scrutinizing it with his expert eye. A hush fell over the room. Then, he spoke, his words measured and precise. He explained, in a manner that even the most ignorant could understand, that the letter was, in fact, a masterful copy, a forgery of considerable skill, but a forgery nonetheless. He pointed out the subtle inconsistencies, the flaws in the paper, the ink, the handwriting. The room erupted in murmurs of disbelief and shock. The deal collapsed on the spot. The investors, realizing they were about to be duped, withdrew their support. Isabel's family reputation, built on a foundation of lies, crumbled before everyone's eyes. The smug self-assurance vanished, replaced by a look of utter devastation. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Isabel's family went bankrupt. Their assets were seized. Their name became synonymous with fraud and deception. Leo, finally seeing the truth, came to me, broken and remorseful. He begged for forgiveness, for understanding. I offered him neither. He had chosen his path, and he had to live with the consequences. In the end, I donated the family heirloom Bible, the one genuine artifact in their possession, to a university, establishing an archive dedicated to the preservation of authentic historical documents. It was a small victory, but a significant one. It was a way to ensure that the truth would endure, that the lessons of the past would not be forgotten. My journey wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about tearing down the Dubois family. It was about protecting the truth, about preserving authenticity in a world increasingly driven by superficiality. It was about showing my son that true value lies not in appearances or wealth, but in integrity and honesty. It was a long and arduous road, filled with uncertainty and risk, but it was a journey worth taking. So, what will you do to protect the truth? What legacy will you leave behind? Think about it. What small step can you take today to champion authenticity in your own life? Don't let appearances deceive you. Seek the truth, and let it guide you. Because in the end, that's all that truly matters. Okay, here we go. Let's continue the story. Seek the truth, and let it guide you. Because in the end, that's all that truly matters. Those words, they resonate even more now, after everything that happened. After the drive, the rejection, the investigation, the exposure, and the reconciliation. But the truth, it's rarely simple. It's layered, complex, and often painful to uncover. It wasn't just about a fake letter, you see. It was about Leo, my son, and the life he was building on a foundation of sand. A life built on appearances, on wealth, on a woman whose family history was as meticulously crafted as that forged presidential correspondence. He was so blinded by the glitter, the perceived prestige, that he couldn't see the rot underneath. And honestly, maybe a part of me was to blame. Did I focus too much on success, on achievement? Did I inadvertently teach him to value the superficial? These questions haunted me, swirling around in my motel room that night, more unsettling than the revelation of Isabel's family's deceit. The truth about the letters was one thing, a concrete fact I could grasp and expose. But the truth about my son, about our relationship, that was a far more elusive and agonizing pursuit. He'd always been a good kid, easy to please, eager to impress. But somewhere along the line, that eagerness morphed into a desperate need for validation, a craving for the approval of others. He'd become obsessed with the trappings of success, the outward symbols of wealth and status. And Isabel, with her carefully curated image and her family's fabricated history, was the ultimate prize, the embodiment of everything he thought he wanted. Analyzing that photograph, deciphering the inconsistencies in the supposed presidential correspondence, it was almost therapeutic. It gave me something concrete to focus on, a problem to solve. Each clue I uncovered, each lie I exposed, felt like a small victory, a step closer to understanding the bigger picture. But the real challenge wasn't proving the letters were fake. The real challenge was getting Leo to see the truth, to break free from the illusion he'd created for himself. Calling him, testing his knowledge of history, that was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Hearing his shallow, regurgitated responses, realizing how little he actually knew about the supposed historical significance of the letters, it was heartbreaking. He wasn't interested in truth, in authenticity. He was only interested in the image, the perception. He was a puppet, dancing to Isabel's family's tune, and I couldn't stand by and watch him destroy himself. That's when the plan began to form. A risky plan, a desperate plan, but a plan nonetheless. I knew I couldn't just tell him the truth. He wouldn't believe me. He was too invested, too emotionally attached to the lie. I had to expose it publicly, in a way that couldn't be ignored. And that meant involving others, bringing in the experts, forcing the truth into the light. It was a gamble, a high-stakes game with my son's future on the line. But sometimes, you have to take a risk, to force a confrontation, to tear down the facade in order to reveal the truth beneath. Because in the long run, a life built on lies is no life at all. And I couldn't let my son waste his potential on a foundation that was destined to crumble. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. And I couldn't let my son waste his potential on a foundation that was destined to crumble. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. But how? How do you expose a lie so deeply woven into the fabric of a family's identity? It wasn't enough to simply tell Leo, he was blinded by affection, by the allure of a world he desperately wanted to be a part of. He wouldn't believe me, not without irrefutable proof. So, I needed a plan, a strategy that would not only reveal the truth but also protect Leo from the fallout. I spent the rest of that agonizing night in the sterile motel room, the hum of the air conditioner a constant drone in the background, trying to formulate a course of action. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Leo's face, a mixture of happiness and naivety, and the cold, calculating gaze of Isabel. The next morning, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a burning sense of purpose, I decided to focus on what I knew, the fake presidential correspondence. That had to be the key. It was the foundation of their supposed legacy, the source of their perceived prestige. If I could expose it as a fraud, the whole house of cards would come tumbling down. But simply stating it was fake wouldn't be enough. I needed an expert, someone with credibility and authority, someone whose word would carry weight. That's when the idea struck me. The director of the National Archives. If I could get him to examine the documents, his opinion would be undeniable. But how to get his attention? I couldn't just call him up and say, "Hey, I think this family is peddling fake historical documents." He'd laugh me off the phone. I needed a stage, a platform where the truth could be revealed publicly, where it would be impossible to ignore. And that's when I remembered the upcoming party, the one celebrating the business deal supposedly secured with the help of this priceless collection. That was it. That was my opportunity. I started making calls, discreetly inquiring about the party, the guest list, the key players involved in the deal. I learned that a prominent journalist, known for her investigative work and unwavering commitment to the truth, was also invited. Perfect. She could amplify the expose, ensuring it reached a wider audience. Convincing her was the next hurdle. I crafted an email, carefully worded, hinting at the possibility of historical forgeries and suggesting a story that could shake the foundations of the local elite. I included a few tantalizing details, enough to pique her interest without revealing my entire hand. To my relief, she responded within hours, eager to learn more. Now, I had my stage and my messenger. All I needed was to set the trap. I contacted the director of the National Archives, presenting myself as a concerned citizen with information regarding potentially fraudulent historical artifacts. I emphasized the importance of preserving authentic history and the potential damage these forgeries could inflict on the historical record. I mentioned the upcoming party, the presence of the documents, and the potential for a major business deal based on their supposed value. He was intrigued, cautiously so, but intrigued nonetheless. He agreed to attend the party, unofficially, to assess the situation. With the pieces in place, I felt a strange sense of calm, a quiet confidence that the truth would prevail. I knew this wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, denial, and likely, anger. But I was prepared. I had to be. For Leo. For the sake of his future. The hours leading up to the party were agonizing. I paced the motel room, replaying the plan in my head, anticipating every possible scenario. I knew that once I set this in motion, there would be no turning back. The stakes were high, and the consequences could be devastating. But I couldn't stand by and watch my son be deceived, his life built on a lie. I had to act. And I did. I had to act. And I did. The hurt, the disbelief, the sheer audacity of it all, it fueled something inside me. Sitting in that motel room, the cheap floral wallpaper mocking my despair, I knew I couldn't just drive away and pretend it hadn't happened. My son, Leo, was about to make a monumental mistake, and I, his father, was the only one who seemed to see it. Isabel. Her name tasted like ash in my mouth. From the moment I met her, something felt off. Too polished, too perfect, too unreal. And the way she dismissed me at the door, her eyes like chips of ice, confirmed my deepest fears. She was a user, a manipulator, and Leo was completely blinded by her charm, her family's supposed prestige. Prestige. That's what it all came down to, wasn't it? Leo, always striving for acceptance, for validation, had finally found it in the arms of a woman who represented everything he thought he wanted. A wealthy family, a prominent social circle, a life of effortless ease. But what he didn't realize, what he couldn't see, was that it was all built on a foundation of lies. I started small, a simple Google search. Isabel's family name, prominent in local society, yielded a plethora of articles, social media posts, and philanthropic endeavors. Everything seemed picture perfect. But something nagged at me. It was too curated. Too flawlessly presented. Like a stage set designed to impress, not reflect reality. Then I remembered the photo. The one prominently displayed in their living room, the one Isabel had pointed to with such pride during our awkward first meeting. A presidential correspondence, she had called it, a letter supposedly written by a founding father, a priceless artifact passed down through generations. It was supposed to be the cornerstone of their family legacy. That photo became my obsession. I zoomed in, pixel by pixel, analyzing the handwriting, the paper, the ink. My years as a rare book dealer, a profession I'd poured my heart and soul into, weren't for nothing. I knew the telltale signs of authenticity, the subtle nuances that separated a genuine historical document from a clever forgery. And the more I looked, the more I saw. The paper, supposedly dating back to the 18th century, had a suspiciously modern sheen. The ink, claiming to be iron gall, lacked the characteristic fading and discoloration. And the handwriting, it was too consistent, too perfect, lacking the natural variations and imperfections of a handwritten document from that era. It was a fake. A masterful one, perhaps, but a fake nonetheless. And if that presidential correspondence was a fake, what else was? My mind raced, connecting the dots, piecing together the puzzle. The wealth, the prestige, the social standing, it all seemed to hinge on this carefully constructed illusion. I spent the next few hours poring over online archives, historical databases, and genealogical records. The more I dug, the more inconsistencies I uncovered. Fabricated family histories, exaggerated accomplishments, and conveniently omitted details. It was a house of cards, built on a foundation of deception. The fakes weren't just a family quirk, a harmless embellishment of their history. They were about to be leveraged, used as collateral for a massive business deal that would solidify their position in society and, undoubtedly, enrich themselves further. Leo, in his naive infatuation, was being used as a pawn in their elaborate game. I had to stop it. I had to expose the truth, not just for Leo's sake, but for the sake of integrity, of authenticity, of the very values I had tried to instill in him throughout his life. But how? How could I, a disgraced father, a man who had driven 15 hours only to be turned away at the door, possibly hope to unravel such a deeply entrenched web of lies? The answer, I knew, lay in the truth itself. And I was about to unleash it. The answer, I knew, lay in the truth itself. And I was about to unleash it. But not in a blaze of glory, not with accusations and shouting. No, this required finesse, a surgeon's precision. Leo was my son, after all, even if he was currently blinded by, well, let's just call it ambition. Isabel's ambition, to be precise. And her family's. I spent the next few days meticulously crafting my plan. It was a delicate dance, balancing the need to expose the truth with the desire to minimize the damage to Leo. He was, after all, caught in the crossfire. He genuinely seemed happy, or at least, content. But was it real happiness, or the gilded cage kind? I couldn't let him live a lie, not if I could help it. The fake presidential correspondence was the key. It wasn't just a collection of forgeries, it was the foundation upon which Isabel's family was building their future. They were using it as collateral for a massive business deal, a deal that would solidify their social standing and financial power. And Leo, bless his heart, was completely oblivious. I needed an audience, a stage. I couldn't just whisper the truth in Leo's ear, he wouldn't believe me. He'd see it as jealousy, resentment. No, I needed an authority, an expert, someone who could speak with undeniable credibility. That's when I decided to invite the director of the National Archives. Getting in touch with him wasn't easy. It required a few favors, some carefully worded emails, and a bit of old-fashioned charm. But eventually, he agreed to attend the party announcing the deal. He was intrigued by the prospect of examining the presidential correspondence, and I knew he wouldn't be easily fooled. I also invited a journalist, someone with a reputation for uncovering the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. I needed someone to document the event, to ensure that the truth was not only revealed but also disseminated. The more eyes on this, the better. The day of the party arrived, and I felt a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I knew what I was about to do would have significant consequences, but I also knew it was the right thing to do. Leo deserved to know the truth, even if it shattered his illusion of happiness. The party was everything you'd expect, champagne flowing, canapés circulating, and the air thick with the scent of money and ambition. Isabel's family was in their element, basking in the attention and anticipation. Leo, by their side, looked, well, he looked like a prop. The director of the National Archives arrived, a distinguished gentleman with a quiet demeanor and a piercing gaze. He was immediately drawn to the display of presidential correspondence, carefully arranged in glass cases. He examined each document with meticulous attention, his expression growing increasingly grim. The journalist, meanwhile, was busy taking notes and observing the scene. She had a keen eye for detail, and I could see that she was already piecing together the puzzle. The tension in the room was palpable, a silent countdown to the moment of truth. Isabel's grandfather, a man with a face like weathered leather and eyes that could bore through steel, approached the director. He launched into a lengthy explanation of the collection's significance, emphasizing its historical value and its potential to enhance the family's legacy. The director listened politely, his expression unreadable. And then, the moment arrived. The director cleared his throat and addressed the crowd. "These documents," he began, his voice calm and measured, "are indeed fascinating. However, I must point out that they are, unfortunately, not authentic. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Isabel's grandfather's face turned ashen. Leo looked confused, bewildered. The director continued, calmly explaining the inconsistencies and anachronisms that revealed the documents to be masterful forgeries. The room fell silent. The champagne stopped flowing, the canapés went untouched. The air, once thick with ambition, now hung heavy with disbelief and shame. The business deal, the family's reputation, their entire future, it all crumbled before my eyes. The truth was out. The lie had been exposed. And Leo finally saw the world as it truly was. It was a painful awakening, but it was necessary. He had to know. It was a painful awakening, but it was necessary. He had to know. He had to see the truth, however ugly it might be. The phone call with Leo, where I subtly probed his knowledge of historical documents, confirmed my worst fears. He was completely oblivious, blinded by Isabel's charm and the allure of her family's supposed prestige. He was a pawn in their game, and I couldn't stand by and watch him lose everything. The thought of him entangled in their web of lies, financially ruined and emotionally devastated, fueled my determination. That night in the motel, sleep eluded me. My mind raced, piecing together the fragments of information I had gathered. The fake presidential correspondence, the impending business deal, Isabel's grandfather's shady dealings, it all painted a disturbing picture. I knew I had to act, and I had to act fast. But how could I expose them without hurting Leo even more? How could I reveal the truth without shattering his world completely? The answer came to me in the early hours of the morning, a risky but potentially effective plan. I decided to orchestrate a public unveiling of the truth, a carefully calculated move that would expose Isabel's family's deception without directly implicating Leo. It was a gamble, but I felt it was the only way to save him from himself. I knew it would be painful for him, but sometimes, the truth is the only medicine, however bitter it may taste. I started by reaching out to a journalist I knew, someone with a reputation for uncovering corruption and a keen eye for detail. I hinted at a story involving forged historical documents and a high-stakes business deal, piquing their interest without revealing too much. Then, I contacted the director of the National Archives, a respected expert in historical authentication, and invited them to the unveiling of the precious letter. I framed it as an opportunity to showcase a rare piece of American history, knowing that they wouldn't be able to resist the lure of such a prestigious event. The day of the party arrived, and I felt a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. Everything was riding on this moment. As I watched Isabel's family proudly display the fake letter, I knew the moment of truth was near. The director of the National Archives stepped forward, and with a polite but firm tone, declared the letter a masterful copy. The room fell silent. The color drained from Isabel's face. The carefully constructed facade of her family began to crumble before my eyes. The business deal collapsed instantly. Reputations were ruined. The consequences were swift and devastating. Isabel's family, exposed as frauds, faced financial ruin and social disgrace. It was a harsh outcome, but it was the price they had to pay for their deception. Leo, initially confused and heartbroken, slowly began to understand the depth of their lies. He was angry, hurt, and ashamed, but he was also free. In the aftermath, Isabel's family went bankrupt. Leo, stripped of his illusions, came to me, humbled and remorseful. He begged for forgiveness, admitting that he had been blinded by his desire for acceptance and material wealth. It was a difficult conversation, filled with pain and regret, but it was also a step towards healing. I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I knew he needed it. I decided to donate the family heirloom Bible, the one authentic piece of history we possessed, to a university, establishing an archive in my family's name. It was a way to honor our true legacy, a legacy of knowledge, integrity, and truth. The final scene shows me, years later, speaking to a group of students, sharing my story and emphasizing the importance of critical thinking, authentic heritage, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. It's a reminder that while lies may offer temporary comfort, the truth, however painful, will always set you free. So, what's the takeaway from all this? Don't be afraid to question what you see and hear. Dig deeper. Seek the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. And remember, a genuine legacy is built on integrity, not illusions. What will your legacy be? What steps will you take today to ensure that it's one of truth and authenticity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about the importance of truth in a world filled with deception. Don't just passively consume information, actively seek understanding. Be critical, be curious, and above all, be honest with yourself and others. The world needs more truth seekers, and it starts with you.